Halo Infinite had a surprise launch on November 15th to celebrate the 20th anniversary of the franchise. The game launched in its first season, Heroes of Reach, which will of course be the topic of today's video. We'll be going over the stuff that came out with this season, the events that happened across it, and basically every big thing that happened across the season. At the end, I'll be giving my overall thoughts and talking about where the game will go in the future and whether or not I'm excited for the future of Halo Infinite. But without further ado, let's jump straight in. Halo Infinite released in beta on November 15th. The game launched with 10 maps, 7 of which were for Arena and 3 were for Big Team Battle. There was also the Academy stuff, which included a tutorial, the weapon drills, and also the training mode, which is pretty fun. There was also a 100 tier battle pass, which focused mostly on cosmetics from Reach, however did give us some new stuff too. There was also the store system, which at the time had 2 daily slots and 2 weekly slots that updated every Tuesday going forward. There was a few game modes, some of which were new, some of which were old and new, and obviously returning modes. There was a decent amount there, but it didn't exactly feel like a lot. And this was fine because the game was in beta. People were expecting more to release on December 8th. Unfortunately, a lot of fans, including myself, would be very disappointed when that day rolled around. There was a few problems with the stuff that Halo Infinite launched with. Although the 10 maps that were there were fine, they suffered from one issue, and that was that a lot of them felt too similar to one another. There were 7 arena maps, 6 of which were all set in man-made structures. They were all human architecture, one of which, Behemoth, being Forerunner. Now that's not to say each of the human maps looked the same, but when Halo is known for having these really cool sort of different cultures, these different architectures, when you think of the Covenant, the Banished, Forerunners, when most of the maps were all human ones, it definitely got quite boring quite quickly. The level design of each of these maps for the most part was fine, and they're all pretty enjoyable. Some of them didn't suit specific modes. Behemoth in Ranked is horrible, and I'm so glad they took it out. There's also the 3 Big Team Battle maps, which are all set in like grassy fields. The most unique of these is probably Fragmentation, due to the fact that it's got the loot caves, which felt like a pretty unique feature. But for the most part, everything just sort of blended together too much. None of the new maps felt like they stood out as much as maps from older games would, bar a few exceptions. Fans were of course disappointed that they didn't really bring back any old maps. We saw successors to some of those old maps, but people wanted to see stuff they were familiar with. As for the Battle Pass, that's something that a lot of people were annoyed by. A lot of people don't like the monetization system in Halo Infinite as a whole, and I'm going to go over that a bit more in a moment, but talking about just the Battle Pass for now, there was 100 tiers, and for the money, I think the Battle Pass is fine enough. But at the time, it felt like such a chore to get through. The challenges were really hard, and didn't provide anywhere near enough XP. There was also the fact that a lot of the rewards in the Battle Pass did feel quite underwhelming, and a lot of the free stuff wasn't great, or was really hard to unlock. 343 were quick to address the challenges, and did make changes to them, making the Battle Pass much easier, and making it a bit more of a breeze to progress through. I did have fun grinding through the Battle Pass, and again, I do like the content here. I wish it contained a bit more, and considering the game was initially supposed to have 120 or 130 tiers in its Battle Pass, it's quite saddening to see that 343 scaled it back so that they could add some of that content to the shop instead. But for the most part, considering the Battle Pass never expires, you have it forever, and the content there was cool, I'd say it was worth the money. As for the shop, well, the shop's a different story. It has 4 slots, 2 of which were weekly, and 2 of which were daily. This changed very quickly on in the game's lifespan, as I think 343 sort of may have realised that they didn't quite have enough content. We ended up going to 1 daily item later on in the season, which then didn't even have a different item every day. The stuff on the shop, for the most part, at times was okay, but a lot of the time was very underwhelming, and also very overpriced. But again, this is something that 343 decided to change later on in the season, adding sales to some items, or just making some of the newer bundles a much fairer price. People were definitely excited when the game launched in its beta, and were definitely having a fun time, but as that December 8th day was approaching, fans were hoping for more. When December 8th did roll around and the game officially launched, fans were disappointed to see nothing was added except the campaign. There wasn't really any new cosmetics or anything to unlock in the multiplayer, there was no new maps, there wasn't really any new modes. Things like Tactical Slayer and Fiesta had been added, but other than the single player campaign, it had no co-op or anything like that, there wasn't really anything new to do. Now don't get me wrong, I think Halo Infinite's campaign is phenomenal, but that of course isn't the topic of today's video. I love the campaign, you unlocked cool multiplayer cosmetics, Disappointing that there was no armor, as games in the past usually let you unlock armor for the multiplayer, whereas this just sort of provided coatings, and these coatings were a lot better than some of the other ones we'd seen, but it was still disappointing regardless. The only other points in time where new content had been added to Halo Infinite was during the game's events. One of these did happen before the game's launch, this being the Tenrai event. The first week of it had launched before the game, and again, this got a lot of fans really annoyed, as the event didn't really have anything to offer. Most of the first 7 tiers were made up of challenge swaps or XP grants. There was a few emblems scattered about, there was like 1 or 2 shoulder pads and a helmet. For an event, this was really underwhelming, but again, 343 did change this, adding much more content to the event pass, making it much better overall. People definitely got sick and tired of the Tenrai event. Personally, I did enjoy, well, I like the cosmetics, but I don't like Fiesta on Halo Infinite, and I wish 343 did something a bit more unique for the mode. Having a mode where we just run around with energy swords probably would have been much more fun and much more fitting for a samurai themed event. The second event we had was Winter Contingency, which launched around the Christmas period, not much longer after the game had fully released. This also didn't really add much. There was no event mode, there was just a few cosmetics which you'd get by playing at least 1 match every day. So again, it was a bit of a disappointment. People were expecting more Christmas related things to be present. Maybe some of that stuff could be in the shop, maybe one of the maps would be snowed over and have Christmas lights, since there was Christmas related items in the game files, yet none of that happened, none of that released. So already Infinite seemed like it was off to a pretty rough start. The actual launch didn't add any new content and the game still felt like it was in beta. The first 2 events were very disappointing and fans were in anguish. Of course, when Tenrai did return, as I said, they added much more content to it and it was a bit better this time around, but you still had to play Fiesta, which people were annoyed by. People didn't like the challenges, and some of these challenges were brutal. The Stop Killing Sprees one is a fan favourite. But the next event that we had, the Cyber Showdown event, is probably the best that the game had to offer. Cyber Showdown added a brand new game mode, this being Attrition. Attrition is very fun. Each team has a set amount of lives, and after a certain portion in time in the match, a zone starts to close in. It has some Battle Royale elements, which I think made it very intense, and overall it was a great new addition to Halo. Unfortunately, after the event had ended, 343 had taken the mode out of the game, and it was gone for the rest of the season. The cosmetics that were in Cyber Showdown was pretty cool. You got the holographic mohawk and the little visor thing, the holographic visor, but they were off center, and 343 said they couldn't fix them until Season 2. So it seemed like basically nothing was going to happen until next season. Cyber Showdown was definitely a good event and one that a lot of fans enjoyed. A lot of people came back for this event, but it wasn't enough to save the game. The final event that we had during Season 1 was the Tactical Ops event. This was focused around SWAT. It added some new SWAT game modes. You got the Commando variant, the Mangler, Sidekick and Stalker Rifle variant. I am a huge fan of some of these variants. I think the Mangler one was surprisingly my favourite one. Even though I thought I was going to hate it, it actually ended up being super fun. These probably adding my favourite cosmetics in the game. The Mark V Zeta helmet looks sweet and is still the one that I'm using. Luckily, these variants did stay in the game, but this was the last major event that the game had, other than Tenrai coming back a couple more times. So that was basically the end of the Season 1 content. One thing that I actually forgot to mention that was pretty huge during Season 1 was the fact that Big Team Battle was broken for 2 months. You couldn't really play it. You might be able to get a game now and again, however the chances of this were happening were really low, and then you could join a game for there to only be like 6 other players in the lobby. You might have 3 people on your team and about 5 on the enemy team. It never really felt like Big Team Battle. This period was rough for me, especially as Big Team Battle is my favourite thing to play, and I didn't really want to touch Arena or Ranked, so the fact that I couldn't play Big Team Battle was very, very disappointing. So Season 1 had been extremely rough, to say the least. There was a lot of things that disappointed people. The fact that there was only 10 maps, that wouldn't have necessarily been an issue if probably if the maps weren't all as similar as they were. Again, the fact that all 3 Big Team Battle maps have similar biomes definitely affected it negatively. I think if we had like a desert map, a grassy map, and a snow map, then people's opinions would be a little bit different. But it's safe to say that Halo Infinite just did not provide enough content during its first season. However, there is good news ahead. Season 2 is right around the corner, and although that has disappointing things too, like the fact that it's another 6-month season, there's also a lot of positives there. There may only be 2 new maps, but those 2 maps look awesome. They probably look better than any of the maps we've already got in the game. The new Battle Pass looks so much better, and there's also story events too, so there'll be a reason to keep playing this time around. 343 have also said they're committed to bringing monthly updates. Hopefully this is something they stick to. We'll also be getting co-op during this season, finally, and hopefully Forge near the later end. Forge is supposed to be releasing in beta round about the end times frame for Season 2, but once it has launched in beta, it will be there for good. Forge will never go away after that point, which is something I'm definitely looking forward to. The future of Halo Infinite is definitely looking bright, but it's going to take us some time to get there. Now it's just a question of whether or not people are going to stick around. Halo is of course always going to have its fans, whether or not Halo Infinite will is a different story. Most people might just go back to Master Chief Collection and keep reliving the classics. I hope 343 do have the chance to pull it back because I love Halo Infinite and I think it does have a lot to offer. 343 just need to show fans that they can make it work, that they can make it right, and that Halo Infinite is going to be one of the best Halo games of all time. Season 1 definitely let me down. I've been waiting for this game for years, as did every other Halo fan on the planet, and it just didn't offer enough. That's not to say the game isn't fun. Halo Infinite is a very fun game. I think the core gameplay is amazing. I think the campaign is really fun, but the game has issues, and it has issues that it needs to fix badly. But this is something 343 said they're going to do. They're going to make the game better, and I'm glad they are. I'm glad they're sticking to it. Anyway, that's everything I've got to say today, folks. If you enjoyed today's video, make sure to leave a like and subscribe if you're new here. I'm aiming for 1,000 subs by the end of the year, and I think that's an achievable goal. Cheers again, folks, and I'll catch you all in the next one.